iced tea. Okay. So, we don't have a clicker, so I'm gonna have to move back and forth, and I hope everyone can see me. And welcome to those people who are outside of the office now and are streaming in. I am the state FASD coordinator on behalf of the Department of Public Health. And I work at the Institute for Health and Recovery. We have, we provide CPHI services also. And I provide the clinical supervision to them on FASD. So anyway, do you have, and I hope everyone can read the slides. I tend not to read them, okay? So do any of these symptom or behaviors seem familiar to you? Okay, I thought so. So I'd like to introduce you to Fred. Fred's 7, foster child, trauma survivor, and look at all of those diagnoses that he has. You see them? You ever know anyone like Fred? Okay. And look at how he's described: explosive, controlling, resistant, all of these things. And oh, by the way, this isn't really Fred. He's just cute. So here are some of his primary characteristics. Dysmaturity, very common. I think that's what we were just talking about. The 13-year-old who liked to play with dolls and babies and things like that. Sensory processing, overhead lights. Language, memory, it learns his colors or ABCs one day, the next day they're gone. Executive functioning, a lot of those deficits. And since you're all clinicians, I'm not going to describe these. However, if I go too fast or I talk about things that you don't know what I'm talking about, just stop me. Really, don't be shy. Okay? And Jennifer had suggested I hand out the slides to you during the presentation, and I declined that invitation because I like it to be more interactive. And so please feel free to speak up and make comments. Okay.
Will you provide them afterwards?
I have them for you, yeah. Okay,
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't have to worry about taking notes so
No,
much.
you don't. And I know people like to have them, but I just want to have more
Yeah.
of a back and forth. And these are the typical interventions that you would have for somebody like Fred. Is there anything that you would add? I didn't know, not necessarily. And guess what? They didn't work for him. So we're going to go back to Fred in a while. But as you all know, we are in the midst of an opiate epidemic in New England and across the country. And we have all these poor little babies who are being born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. So I want to just ask you from the perspective of fetal health, not any criminal behavior, not HIV or any of that. If you had a pregnant woman that was using heroin, tobacco, and alcohol, which one would you want her to give up first?
Alcohol.
Do you all know that?
Well, just, it's implied.
It's implied. That's right, you know. In fact, it's true. And this is the part where you say, this lady came and said, I don't care if she shoots up as long as she doesn't drink while she's doing it. And that's not true. You know, there are a lot of risks to opiate use. Environmental, sociological, cultural, all of that, and health-wise. But if from the fetal perspective, the opiates, methadone, Suboxone, morphine, heroin, in themselves are not that bad for fetal development. It's hard, and they don't get out scot-free. But the research indicates that with the proper postnatal environment, the healthy family, stability, no trauma, good support services like yours, that for the most part, those children can grow and thrive. It's not true with alcohol, somebody who has an FASD. And what is the second most dangerous drug for fetal development? Cigarettes? Tobacco. Yes, and so there we have it, the two legal ones.
Yeah.
Any comments? And so it is, a teratogen is a poison, and we know that alcohol is a poison. And if you had an embryo small enough to fit into the 0 in 2012 on an actual penny, that embryo could be adversely impacted by alcohol exposure. So as I was mentioning before we formally got started, no one has FASD. A lot of people say their kids do, but it is a spectrum. The most severe end is FAS. We're going to talk about that. I keep missing that little parens. This is the new one from the DSM-5, the neurodevelopmental disorder. It's only in the appendix, but we are thrilled that we even got it into the appendix. It took a big national effort to get there. Partial FAS. And then we do get a lot of birth defects. We don't use this term too much anymore, but we do get birth defects. It is, FASDs are more common than Down syndrome. The organic reverse effects are not reversible. And they last a lifetime. And I'm going to say now a lot of the things that the adverse outcomes from prenatal exposure. I want to also say that people with an FASD can live and thrive and have wonderful lives. They're just going to be different lives than anyone expected. Okay? So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of brain slides, but I do want to start with that because I want to emphasize that FASDs are brain disorders. And you can just see here, I'm not going to make you go through all of these, but I put this up because in FASD people often say, well, you have to just try harder. And in FASD, it's not trying harder, it's trying differently. Okay? There will not be a test on brain development after this. This is interesting. This is, the corpus callosum is like a bridge between the two hemispheres. And over here is a very healthy, normal corpus callosum. This is somebody with full-blown FAS, and you see here, you can barely see the callosum, right? What that means is that information that is taken into the brain cannot be retrieved and fed back. And we'll have some examples, particularly receptive language and memory. And so that provides a lot of problems. Here is full-blown FAS. These children have a small head and below the 10th centile, but it's not just because they're petite. They would be smaller than the other statures in their family. And often they have motor coordination problems. A long list of cognitive disabilities, as you can see here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you have one neurological disorder, you're liable to have others. So this is too small, and I know that. I can send this to you. This is just to say that this is a very new study that found that FASD alone is comorbid with 40 other health conditions. And some of them are behavioral, well, some are like the language disorders, but there's a lot of ear problems, dental problems. Sometimes dentists do the diagnosing because they may see kids who have both sets of teeth growing at once, or their brain is malformed because alcohol attacks whatever part of the fetus is growing most rapidly at that point. And let me see. Oh, and blindness, eye problems. So these are just the top ones. And then the other mental health disorders I'm going to go over with you. Here are the common comorbidities. They say that over 60% of kids people with an FASD have ADHD. And a lot of them also have RAD. and sensory disorders. And as you can imagine, there's a high, there's the genetic heritability of substance use dependence, and then the trauma and everything. And so these are all very common. And the thing that's important about that is that we can't really adequately treat any of those other conditions until we know that they have FASD, because that will inform our treatments and interventions. Now, this one you do have in your handout. You can look at that at your leisure. This is not a diagnostic tool by any means, but it gives you an idea of some of the differences between FASD and some of these other mental health diagnoses. Questions, comments? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So going back to that last slide,
Yeah?
with the comorbidities,
Yes.
is the thinking that the FAS is causal of these things?
Yes and no, because the alcohol has attacked the brain
Yeah.
in utero and has compromised it. The brain is thus more open or more receptive to other comorbidities.
Because what I'm wondering is, if the parent's drinking, if they have a substance abuse problem, they're alcoholic, then, that may lead to difficulty of the parent attaching to the child. So how do you tease out causality versus consequence there?
We'll go into that a little
Okay.
bit. However, if you know that a woman drank alcohol during her pregnancy, you start with that.
Mhm.
And one of the problems that we have so many of these children who are trauma survivors is because of that. They grow up in a house that's characterized by substance use disorders, inconsistency, who knows what else, and also because these children are very hard to parent, there is a high rate of abuse by the biological parents. So here, now it's very common that a child can have all of these. So let me just show you. We have a child here who doesn't do what the task is, and why? They just don't feel like it. So you provide the positive sense of control and incentives and things like that. This kiddo here has ADHD and doesn't do the task because there's too much going on. This kiddo over here has an FASD, and the task was, okay, you're home, go upstairs, change your clothes, do your homework, put your toys away, and come down for dinner in half an hour. Excuse me?
It's not gonna even remember what the second thing is.
No. And so we have to provide one direction at a time. And then if you have somebody with all of these, you have to be mindful of all of this, limit the stimuli, positive sense of control, things like that. Does this make sense then? Okay. This is a new slide from the CDC, Centers for Disease Prevention and Control. They suggest that we have up to 1 in 20 U.S. school children. Now, that's a high number. And I will say that the psychologists in the field, many of them think that's too high. However, we live in a state where there is a lot of alcohol use and a lot of binge drinking, which is particularly dangerous for prenatal development. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we have we do have a high undiagnosed rate. Even if it's, say, 1 in 40, that's a lot of kids. We have the physical issues and the behavioral issues, and we're going to talk about the lifelong issues. So I made this slide up because A couple years ago, there was a legislative initiative to broaden the DDS, you know DDS, Department of Developmental Services, inclusion to include autism, because those kids often have a higher IQ than the around 70s. And then obviously some legislators or somebody had children in this category. FASD is not, if you have an FASD, you are not eligible for DDS services. And one of the problems is they often have IQs that are higher than around 70, but they can't live up to them. So, you know, no offense to the autism lady over here, we're jealous of autism because there's not the stigma now that there is around fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So even with our lower amount, you know, if we look at the lower prevalence, we still have more FASD in Massachusetts than ASD. And so it's very rare that you have them together. Now I know somebody from William James just got a diagnosis of FASD and ASD, and I said, you know, it's really, really rare that they come together. But there were some sparks of ASD in there, and so the psychologist included it to get benefit, you know, to get services. And we try to discourage that, but there were some. But anyway, just so you know, it's rare that they have both. Now, this is a group of children that are your kids that you serve, and out of 547 of them that were diagnosed, 86% of them either had the wrong diagnosis or were not previously diagnosed. So I have been so impressed with the CBHI crowd, as I call you, because you really get it. And DCF, Department of Children and Families, really gets it too. There's a very high prevalence of FASD in the adult and in the child population. So this should come as no surprise to you. Now here's a little honey with a full-blown FAS. These are the cardinal features: a flat philtrum, a thin upper lip. The eyes are not as wide, you know, they're short openings. And I know it's hard to see with the light on. These people don't have FAS. They just have really developed upper lips and philtrum. And this person here, this person for somebody of African descent, that's a pretty, you know, I'd say that's a pretty nice lip. However, because this person is of African descent, that lip should be in more proportion to the lower lip. So these four individuals up here all have full-blown FAS. And this is a sad slide. And I have two examples today of Native Americans who have an FASD. I want to just make a disclaimer that people of all cultural and ethnic backgrounds have an FASD. This is just a particularly helpful slide. And we also know that people of Native Americans do have more trouble metabolizing alcohol, and because of their because of the poverty in the reservations, that puts them in a higher category. Anyway, you can see the progression of the mother's drinking. She died of alcohol poisoning shortly after the birth of the youngest. And you can see, here's the index child, as she drinks, more and more of the alcohol goes through the placenta because her liver can no longer metabolize it. It's heartbreaking. All four are just little sweeties. However, don't go around looking at people and seeing if they have it, you know? Okay, here are some of the possible secondary health disabilities. Mental health, we know, trouble with the law, no surprise, inappropriate sexual behavior, imprisonment, or institutionalization, disrupted school, and alcohol problems. And there are protective factors. Early diagnosis. The field now is moving toward diagnosing around kindergarten, first and second grades. We had a project to screen kids in early intervention, which was wonderful, but it was only because the pediatricians didn't think it was any of their business to ask the moms about their prenatal alcohol use. So we found that those kids who did screen in positive for risk didn't develop the symptoms until their second or third year. By then they'd aged out. There are some children that are obviously going to be diagnosed at birth, but that's fairly rare. Having the stable and nurturing home, not being a trauma survivor, eligibility for services is a big one. And oddly enough, individuals fare better if they have full-blown FAS or FASD. And why would that be?
They get more services.
They get more services, but they're easier to diagnose because they have the physical features. And so these are the kids that are running around, not thriving, not progressing, that have an undiagnosed FASD. And they're the ones that end up in DYS and DOC. So we want to just have a lens, the FASD lens, before we address these other issues. Am I going too fast? This is a parent slide. This is what people think about these children and young adults. But it really is not that they don't want to do better. For the most part, they really do. But they've got brain damage, and so we have to stop looking at it through a moral lens. And we actually wish that we could change the name, because fetal alcohol syndrome, that's a stigmatizing name for the individuals. Okay, language. This is a big deal. They often are very verbal and very social, and they'll talk, and you'll talk back. However, a lot of what they hear, they can't retrieve because of their brain disorder. And so what they learn today, they'll likely forget tomorrow. And you can go over the primary colors with a child for weeks, and one day they will remember, and another day, it's a brand new day, they have no idea. Now, let me give you literal thinking. They're very literal. You're shooting yourself in the foot. I don't have a gun. This is a true story. Don't drink and drive. There was a young man who was able to drive. He had a license and he could drive, and he was pulled over for drunk driving. He was all over the road. He had an open container on the front seat. He reeked. He couldn't pass the field sobriety test. So later, when he went to the judge, the judge said, you were drunk driving, drinking driving, that's illegal. And this young man said, I never drink and drive. I know it's illegal. I only drink at the stoplights. And so we have to be very, did you see your probation officer? Yeah, she shops in my grocery store. So we have to be very, yeah.
Sorry, I just have a question about the previous slide. I think it said expressive language was better than receptive. Is that before you switched? Is that what
Yes.
it said? Okay. I just wanted to double check that.
So they can speak, but they may not be able to remember what you said and draw it out again. So they're can be very verbal. However, it doesn't often have a lot of content.
Because I'm working with a 3-year-old that has good receptive but very limited expressive language. So that,
Well, how do you know the child has good receptive?
because they can respond to what you're saying, like by doing what you tell them, and that they know what you're saying to them.
Oh, then that's different.
That's different.
That
Okay.
is different. I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
That's okay.
And what's verbal receptive language the basis for? Right? Everything. Oh, sorry. Okay, social situations, naive and gullible. They don't filter what they say. Very common. You have any of your folks like that? Easily manipulated. Now, of course, not everyone is going to have every characteristic. Thank goodness for that. So,
But does everyone have the physical feature, the
No.
facial? They
it's
don't
a
need-
very small. It's just the tip of the iceberg that has the full-blown FAS, and everything underneath the water is FASD, and they're the ones who really need to be identified because they don't have the facial features.
Are there any screening tools? It sounded like there are screening tools.
There are, and you know, I should have brought them, and I didn't bring them. I apologize, but I did bring a couple articles for Jennifer on medications and behavioral interventions, because I'll leave them for you.
Okay.
Because we got these free, but I don't have the copyright to hand them out to you, but I can give you one copy. There are screening tools, and I will send those. They're in the public domain.
Okay.
I should have included them. Okay, this is the kid who doesn't plan the Brinks robbery. This is the one who finally, one of his peers, or her, one of their peers, they always wanted to hang out with, but they were never able to, said, hey, let's go over, so-and-so's dad is gone, and mom, and they said we could go to their house and have a party. Oh, great, I always want to hang with, you know what happens. They go, no one's home, oh, we can go in through the window, it's a breaking and entering, and who's left-handed holding the bag? Literally our kids, our young people. And they don't understand, they sincerely don't understand, oh, well, he said it was okay. Now, over time, you can teach them. They have a lot of trouble connecting cause and effect, empathizing, taking responsibility. It's not that they don't want to, but they just don't understand the concept. There's a lot of sexual misbehavior, as you can see. No surprise. I was just meeting with a family, one of our families, and their little 8-year-old girl is humping the floor. You know, we had a 5-year-old who was trying to insert items in her, her sister's vagina. I mean, these things are horrible, but have any of you had any of these kinds of things happen with your, no?
Yes.
You have?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, just because this happens, it doesn't mean it's an FASD, but we believe that 5-year-old was raped as an infant.
Oh.
So it's very hard to tease out what's what. Here are some other reported sexual behavior, and these are young people who they see their parents or their big sister hugging and kissing with her partner, and they're walking down the street and somebody smiles at them. Oh, that person loves me, and they go up to hug and kiss, and suddenly they're sex offenders. You know, the boundaries is a big issue, and they don't have any understanding of personal boundaries. They don't know the concept of or you're in my space. That's something that they need to be trained. Okay, so we know that there's a lot of, okay, so this is another one of our families. The daughter is like 18 or 19 at this time, and her parents are very protective of her. I think a little overprotective, but they're the parents, and they're adopted parents. And she goes online, and she meets this nice guy online. Nice. And they're talking online, and he says, oh, you want to meet? So she said, great. So she goes out in the middle of the night, on a winter's night, in her pajamas and slippers
Oh, no.
to have this date with a strange man. She'll never do that again. She promised me she wouldn't. But, It's the kind of thing that most of us would never do. Oh, without any identification. Okay. So, we have till 11:30?
Till 11.
Oh, till 11?
Yeah.
I thought, okay. So, I don't think I'm gonna play Morgan for you. You should, you all have these slides, he's on YouTube. You can, he's a young man with an FASD, and he'll talk about some of his disabilities. He is Native American, it's just he's so eloquent. I don't want to stereotype Native Americans by any means. Okay. Interventions. Remember Fred? He acted young, so we adjusted expectations and treated him as if he was younger in a positive way. You couldn't remember? Repeat, repeat, repeat. Slower auditory processing or an auditory disorder? Slow down. Fewer words. Poor transitions. Fewer tasks. Less frustration. Can't sit still? Don't make him sit still. These are very simple adaptations to make, and guess what? Within a week, he had changed his behaviors. Or actually, the intervention folks had changed their behaviors and he could respond positively. This is the heart of what FASD interventions are. And so we want to see things differently. Now, you can read this. I have one of the moms, and the families I work with are all adoptive moms because most of the bio moms have lost custody. And we are working the substance use treatment programs too. She'll often say, I never know if he's acting out and it's FASD or adolescence. And she said, I tend to favor to go for FASD and have an FASD appropriate intervention. And so, you know, we have to stop saying, oh, well, he lies. Well, Fred just wanted to get along and do the right thing, so because he only retrieved maybe every third word, he would fill in to try to please you. Okay? He doesn't care, he just shuts down. He refuses to sit still, he can't sit still. He's resisting, he doesn't get it. So is this helpful? Yes.
I have a question. Is it that he's overstimulated or understimulated in general?
Overstimulated.
Could you explain that?
Yes. It's a lot of it is sensory, all the stuff coming in. I have from when you're working with families with this, you know, you want to shut off the radio, the television, the music, no overhead lights, have only one person in the room if necessary, or just you and the client. They've got sensory integration disorders, sensory disorders, I forget what they're called. And so there's too much coming in and their brain can't function well with all that stimulation.
Okay, I guess I'm just comparing it to ADHD where they have a lack of stimulation, so they engage in, so it's a similar consequence but different origin.
Yes, it is different. Yeah, and so, you know, students in schools should have a special ed kind of room that's, you know, with very little on the walls, not a lot of stuff hanging. Yes. Now, it may be, yeah, that's it. Now, they may be understimulated by their environment, by, you know, being shunned by peers or put in a room because no one can cope with them. That would be understimulation then. That's a good question. So, as I said, the IQ might be high. We have kids with 90 IQs, but they can't live up to them. And so what we want to focus on is the discrepancies between what their IQ is. And so this is what we're trying to convince DDS of. Interventions unlikely to work. These and the now these exercise is good. It's good. One of our young women with full-blown FAS is a competitive swimmer, and that really helps her. That doesn't help her cognitively. It helps her just stress and all of that. And confidence. These stickers don't work. You know, putting stickers on a refrigerator for good behavior, that's not helpful.
Is that
Some-
because they can't remember?
Yes. Yeah, and they see the stickers and yeah, what's that about? Now, for some kids, depending on the level of impact, maybe it will work. I'm just giving you general guidelines. And instead of, you know, if you're using motivational interviewing or something, any of you use MI? No?
Our kids are pretty young, right?
Well, 3 certainly is, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, what we do is we ask them, what helps you? And make a circle of something and say, what helps you? Of course, doing this with a 3-year-old's gonna be, you can't do
That
it with a
can't
3-year-old.
talk.
Yeah. But these are for older children. What helps you? What doesn't help you? What do we want to keep awake? Get out a farm set or something. Be creative in the way that you approach them. Softer lighting, one direction at a time. Don't say, do you understand? Say, what do you understand? What are you going to do? Lots of repetition. Short-term consequences. Don't say on Tuesday, if you don't do this, you're not going to go to the movies on Friday. They'll say, well, why on Friday? You know, it's like a new day. Friday, I didn't do anything. Be liberal, okay. Be flexible in your sessions. Make sure that there's some kind of buffer, time buffer, between getting off the bus or getting out of the car and having a session. Make sure they have a snack that they can just,
Unwind.
shake off the day. And you might want to use a stopwatch or an egg timer that's not very loud or something to say, okay, you're only going to have to talk for, you know, this amount of time. And don't expect them to sit the whole time. Let them get out and walk and move around. You probably do a lot of this anyway. I'm just putting it in a context. Sometimes you can ask clients to use colors. What color do you feel like today? Now that's a concept that might be hard. So try an animal. Depends on the age and everything. Just be creative. And you might want to like put a ribbon or something around someone to teach them you shouldn't go closer to this unless that other person. Just be very concrete. Limit the number of plans if you can. You want to give these kids a win. Give these youngsters a win. And the more you can be consistent, the better. And you may not be able to complete a whole session. I don't know how you would do that with your billing and everything. You know, your time. It might be more helpful to have some shorter sessions than a longer one, but that's, you know, you can deal with that. Now, sometimes a youth with an FASD freaks out. I just presented on Friday to the state directors of the ESP services. You all know what that is? The emergency service providers who, from MBHP, the best, best. So I made these slides up for them with some input from parents. So here's some specific approaches that you might use too. One, prepare the setting. And if one family member needs to stay there for whatever kind of reason, it should only be one person aside. This is something I discussed earlier. The 6-word rule, though, maybe you even want to do 6-syllable rule. You know what I mean. So wait to see if it was understood. And I'm very verbal. I am so type A. If somebody doesn't understand, I want to throw more words at them. Doesn't work here. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
This This is so true. 10-second kids in a 1-second world. And you have to wait for them to process what you've said. Gotta have some time of silence is okay. You may want to count to 10. There you have it. Sometimes, this is different from autism. Sometimes the eye contact is usually okay, unless they're still throwing things, of course. But sometimes words can get in the way. And so standing there or sitting there in a non-threatening, open, using good body language pose could be helpful. Okay? This is so important. I don't have time for this either. But Rita Pearson was an educator, and she did a TED Talk, and she was talking about working with, as a teacher in school with very low-performing students, and it sounded like it was a poor urban school. And she had these kids who couldn't succeed, and she said, what am I going to do with them? And so at the beginning of the school year, she said to them, I am the best teacher in the school, and you are the best students. And they put us together so we could show the rest of the school how to do it. So when you walk in the hall, don't go getting in other people's business. You walk down the hall and you think to yourself, I have places to go and things to learn. I am worth the education I get here. I am going to do well. And one of the kids went back and said, Miss Pearson? Really? She said, yes. And then she had a test, 20 questions. One student got 18 wrong. So on the top of that student's paper, she wrote +2 and a smiley face. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I've seen it too.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard the approach.
Yeah. And so the kid goes up and says, is this an F? And she said, yes. Well, why did you give me a +2? Because you're on the road. You're on the road, and the next time you take this test, you're going to do better, aren't you? She said, -18 sucks the life out of you. And these are children who fail at everything. And so it's really important, like you do with your other clients, I'm sure you must be strength-based. We know we change based on our strengths, not our weaknesses. And these people and the parents and the families need to know what they've done right. And it's so important. And if you can't get them to do any deep breathing, carry some bubbles in your bag of tricks. Because you can't hyperventilate and blow bubbles at the same time. Don't expect remorse. Now, over time, they'll be able to learn, oh yes, I shouldn't have done that. You'll have to teach that and go over that with them. Because the brain is plastic, as it were, and malleable while it's growing, the earlier you intervene and start working with these kids, the better the outcomes. That's what the research says. So, and they often won't be able to explain why. Why did you go up and kiss that stranger? I don't know. I just thought she loved me. And don't expect them to keep promises. I know this is hard when you have a constellation of helping professionals, but try to get everyone to at least work on, you may have different goals, but all be cognizant of one simple goal at a time. And focus on it, make sure that that message is shared amongst everyone. I know that's hard. Do your best. Okay, adaptive interventions. These youngsters and young people often have trouble with peers, as some of you know, and they have trouble reading faces. And so you might want to just practice expressions in your session with them. Now, I live in Boston. I'm a really good jaywalker. And I got my granddaughter, though, so I can't jaywalk with her. So, it happens because of a lot of visual spatial impairments, that kids with an FASD and adults with an FASD get run over in the street all the time, because they can't gauge.
How fast it's moving.
Yeah, and so now there's some video interventions that teach you how to cross the street safely. And I won't belabor this, but I just will say, I don't know how many bananas have never fathered a child because the condom was on the banana. Okay? Very literal. Now, let me just ask you, what's the first thing you need to do before you brush your teeth, or one of your clients needs to brush their teeth? What's the first step?
Go into the bathroom.
Walk to the bathroom.
Walk to the bathroom,
Pick up the toothbrush.
pick up the toothbrush.
Pick up the toothpaste.
Turn on the water.
The first step is actually recognizing that you need to. Hygiene is often a problem.
Yeah.
Showering, take a shower, they go in, they don't turn the water on, or they keep their clothes on. You know, one dad said, you know, he turned the water on, but he wouldn't use the soap. You know, you have to be very specific. First you need to know, and then look at all of these skills here. You need object recognition, sensory skills, fine and gross motor skills. Look at all of these steps. We take this for granted. Now, not everyone may not be so impaired, but just be mindful of that. And if you have with a neurological deficit, it can be hard to remember a sequence of things that you need to do. Sleep is a big problem. These are the babies, I know babies with NAS are hard to soothe. These are the babies that the moms often say, my baby doesn't love me. Because they're not comfortable in their own skin. Making sure they get good eye, ear, nose. Okay, a little bit on pharmacology. I want to have time for conversation. I'm not going to go over these. This is I have one of the newest articles on this for Jennifer. There are medications. They're over-medicated because everyone's trying to fix them. Here are some that have been used. These in ADHD tend to address the hyperactivity in oppositional defiance more than the attentive domain. They use the neuroleptic here. This is a very small sample. This is just now starting to work. But sometimes it might be helpful. Why are you shaking your head?
I just think we over-medicate our kids. I think as a society, it's kind of a go-to.
You know, you have to always choose medication in context. And so I'm not suggesting you go out and medicate every child. I'm just saying that sometimes medication can be effective. So please don't misconstrue that. Here are some of the evidence-based interventions that have been developed. We don't have any of them in Massachusetts. We're trying to get funding with William James to present them. I want to say this is the public health message. There is no safe amount of time to drink during pregnancy. Now, if you have